Well, hello everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is your Rattlecast for what day is it? Tuesday, September 24th. We have Al Ortolani on the phone with us, and he'll be joining us in just a minute. But first off, let me say Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry and unaffiliated with any other organization. We've been publishing poems since 1995, founded by Alan Fox, and we just love poetry, and we want these shows to be a way to share and celebrate good poems. And Al Ortolani is really, honestly, one of my favorite poets. He is one of the best storytellers, I would say. He's the author of a whole bunch of books, and I blurbed one of them, Paper Birds Don't Fly, which is one of the last books I blurbed. I don't really do blurbs anymore because it's just hard to keep up with all the requests. But about Paper Birds Don't Fly, I said that it reads like a road trip through the Midwestern mind. It's a long book of poems with room for many moods and musings that meanders through a landscape of humor and insight. Ortolani has packed all we need for the journey: a friendly voice, a bit of music, and the deft hand of a true storyteller guiding the wheel. And with this new book, which you can see on the screen now, Hansel and Gretel Get the Word on the Street, Al Ortolani does the same kind of thing with his experience as a teacher. He's a retired teacher. I think, if I remember right, it's 40 years he taught in public schools, in high school. And this book is sort of little vignettes about the people who live there. And there's humor and wisdom, and it's a really entertaining book throughout. It came with this fall's issue of Rattle.
My mentor on page 17, she was really tired. She was in her 60s. I was a younger teacher, and she would, during planning periods, the kids would be out of her room, and she would lock the door, turn out the lights, and lay down on the floor a little bit. And I knew she was, having some poor health issues, and she would have me make sure she didn't oversleep. And so I would stay in my room and then occasionally slip over to wake her up before the bell rang. And I call this corpse pose, and I wrote the poem. I was needing to do the same thing. And so I was the worn out teacher. I was remembering her situation. Corpse pose. Faculty meeting. I lock my door, turn out the light, and close my eyes on the floor. There was a colleague who used to nap planning period. She was old and tired. I kept an eye on the clock for her, making sure that she was up 5 minutes before the bell. She said she needed to be recomposed before she decomposed. Students start to swarm the hallways. One rattles my doorknob. If my feet are visible, sticking out from under my desk like a body under a dumpster. Well, the school nurse burst into the room with the resource officer. How do I explain this yoga corpse during a faculty meeting? But no one comes. And that in itself is a lonely thought. I unlock the classroom door, high-five the first students through. So there you have the situation of feeling a bit down and negative and burned out, and yet when the students come in, you've got to rise, and I always like to high five them when they came in, and it got me fired up, and then I was alive again, Page 18. I had this young colleague a few years ago, and she was a wonderful young teacher, and I watched her grow. And we were across the hallway from each other, and I could watch her just really come at ease with her students and create an enjoyable classroom where a lot of learning took place. And I was walking by her room one day, and I heard her talking about Theodore Rethke. And they were reading the poem that's used on a number of the AP tests, and I just went blank on it, My Father's Waltz. And if you haven't read that poem, look it up and read it. It's a beautiful poem. Mrs. W. explains Rethke to AP English. If they'd seen a waltz, they'd never danced one. Oh, they knew the word, like we might know the words pan flute or bacchanalia. So when I heard Miss W's fifth hour go dumb as wall paste, the definition vague and untendered, I stepped into the classroom and held out my arms. She took my left hand and I slipped my right around her back, keeping safe distance. We began to waltz the room, at first bumping into desks, the trash can, a computer printer, then finding space built into a rhythm that allowed the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 to swing. The class laughed as we laughed, a moment of clowning turned graceful, one they'd recall in posts and tweets. But for Rethke, I said as we stopped, and I brushed one student's desk free of books and papers. His father had been drinking. He slammed into the world with a belt buckle. Miss W stepped onto my shoes, and I would have careened around the room as if with my daughter, except that I couldn't lift my feet. Give him your sober countenance, she said, as we bent and swayed in imitation, one that cannot unfrown itself. Some got the point, staring at their knuckles on the page. In that poem, the character scrapes his knuckles on his father's belt buckle as they are gallivanting around the room. And that was a great moment for me. We just had a good laugh from the whole thing. Let me do a couple more from this book, and then we'll move to some other poems. Because let me look at one called Game Prayer, page 24. This is one that was commented on by a few. And I grew up in a coaching environment. My father was an athletic trainer at Pittsburgh State University, and as well as an Olympic trainer. And so football, for instance, was always very big, that and baseball. And this is called Game Prayer. And it's about that prayer that the boys say before they go out into the field in the locker room. Maybe it's the way boys look at each other before the last game, their eyes wet and glimmering with rain. Maybe it's that I catch them in these shy moments of waiting, turning the world like a pigskin, flipping it nonchalantly, low spiral, drilling the air. Maybe it's this moment before the splash of lights, before the game prayer, before you run from the door. If so, forgive me for seeing you so vulnerable in that quiet moment before the helmets. And I'll do the last one. That was my last one, but I got the same boys, okay? And it's called Shopping for Fruit, page 34. And this is about a pun that came out of the class one day, and I don't know how it even showed up, but it did. And these guys were hard to say no to and hard to discipline because they always made me laugh. But it's Shopping for Fruit. Melancholia, I asked the class of 17-year-olds. One boy just outside the T-zone answers, a fruit. And I had to laugh. Yes, probably in the produce section at Hy-Vee, you've got the honeydew, the cantaloupe, the melancholia, most likely priced higher than the watermelon, so germane to family picnics, ice cream socials, class reunions. The melancholia ripens slowly on vines of discontent. It is only purchased by the disillusioned when the fruit bin has been emptied of choices. But I keep this cherry to myself. These boys haven't done much produce shopping. They still find bananas amusing. So I will stop on the book with that one. I appreciate you guys listening. Let's look at the poem Asphalt. In going through college, I had to do a lot of temporary jobs, summers, as most of us do. And I got emails from this poem from guys who had also worked asphalt, and they agreed with just about everything in it. Um, Asphalt. The road crew hired temps between semesters to stand beside the hopper shoveling. The foreman disliked college students. He never learned our names, referenced us by the tools we carried. Skip and I were shovels, scraping the hot mix into the conveyor. Ronnie, the college dropout, is a rake. He followed the paver, flicking the screed ridge to a smooth seam. All summer, I shoveled the city streets, made do with whatever shade I could catch. Each day at 5, we cleaned the tools with diesel and putty knives. Then we sprayed our boots, kicking our steel toes against a bar of rail line. We wags with the diesel and scrubbed our hands and faces. Then I drove home, a towel on the seat, another on the armrest. I hung my work clothes on the fence behind the house. They appeared capable of walking off on their own. Let's go to Taco Boat. This is one I'm always asked to read by one guy, H.C. Palmer, a doctor here and poet here in Kansas City. The Taco Boat. You got it there, Tim? Last night I bought a 12-pack of tacos at Taco Bell, not because I was especially hungry, but because I could. My ship had come in, you see, and for once I was rolling in it. I ate 6 of them in front of the television while binging on episodes of some Netflix series, not because it was particularly engaging, but simply because I could. My ship, if you recall, had come in. I packed up the other 6 tacos and brought them to work for lunch, where my fellow employees marveled or laughed. I couldn't tell which, yet my ability to eat 6 soggy tortillas microwaved in their wrappers and spread like dollar bills on the table. I gave one to a friend and she was happy. Happy for the taco, happy for me, happy for everyone who waited for a boat, any boat, to come in. Let's go to a gardening poem. Summer's almost over, but my gosh, we can still eat those tomatoes. Let's go to growing tomatoes. This one's a little different for me. I don't know why. It just seemed more homespun. Growing tomatoes is a lot like waiting for Jesus. Each day you pull up the lawn chair next to your 6 leggy plants. The yellow blossoms and a few green vegetables droop outside the wire cages. You've tied them with white rags, a surrender bowed to the soil. Dusted with 7, they should be free of aphids. You're not an organic farmer. You're not a farmer at all. You slice tomatoes well, and that's about it. You like them salted and spiced with chili peppers. It is June. You have weeks to wait. An asteroid could hit by then. If you leave now, you could be at a roadside stand in Arkansas by sunset. Surely someone is harvesting more than hope.
Do you want to read like one more poem to finish this out?
Yeah, I'll read one more poem to finish this out. And let me read Butterfly Valve. It's a poem for my father, because my dad was he bought more pieces of crap cars than anybody on earth. Because he was a teacher. We were living on a teacher's salary, 5 kids, and that's what we had. And so this is a poem about him, and the butterfly valve being that little piece on the carburetor that allows the gas intake and the air intake to mix correctly. I'm probably saying that wrong because I'm not a mechanic. Butterfly valve. Wiring the exhaust pipe to the frame of the truck is a skill I learned from my father. He could keep a piece of shit Ford or Chevy or Plymouth running without repairs longer than anyone I knew. It was kind of a gift to himself, keeping cash from the mechanic for as long as possible. He'd make do with a leaking gas tank by not topping it off, or avoid a 60 mile per hour front end shimmy by driving 55. As his children moved away into lives of their own, the money ran more freely. He gave up lying on the street with his shoulders wedged under the chassis. He scheduled regular automobile checkups where he'd sit out in the shop with the wrench turners and tell stories about how he used to keep his junkers running with baling wire, heated with cardboard in front of the radiator, ignited with ether, a screwdriver wedged in the throat of the carburetor. He was my hero. I wrote that poem one afternoon, lying on the concrete, looking up at my muffler on my old truck, thinking, I got to keep this thing running. You know?
Yeah. That's one of those poems from Rattle. I don't know which issue it was in.
Oh yeah.
But that screwdriver wedged in the throat of the carburetor is such a memorable image. I think of that if I see the name Al Ortolani, I think of that image pops into my head. Anyway, so thanks so much, Al. It's been a lot of fun. We had about 24 people watching live. We'll have a lot of more people watching later, but people really loved it. People mentioned they loved your reading voice and love your shirt too. So I should say that out loud. It says, "Metaphors be with you." So
I picked this up in Venice Beach down at Beyond Baroque when I was visiting you
really?
a couple of years ago. Yeah, and I thought I got to have this.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Well, thanks so much, Al. It's been a real pleasure, and looking forward to seeing what you do next.